One man, one woman, one universe. And humanity smiled. The sky over the listening array was calm, a deep shade of blue that made the bright steel of the towers look sharper, almost unnatural. Elias Ward leaned against the railing, watching the last light of the sun fade behind the distant mountains. He ran a hand through his short, dark hair, trying to shake off the feeling that today would be different. The air smelled faintly of ozone, a sign that the electrical systems were humming at full power. Inside the main control room, screens glowed with endless streams of data. Elias stared at them, eyes trained to catch patterns most people would never see. It was his job to find meaning in chaos, to separate noise from signal. Normally, the signals they received were repetitive, predictable, boring even. But today something flickered across the monitors that made his heart skip a beat. The signal was weak at first, just a whisper among the static, but it was there. Not a natural phenomenon, not the usual bursts from deep space, but something deliberate, something that felt almost alive. He adjusted the receiver, filtering out background interference. The pattern became clearer. It pulsed, then paused, then pulsed again, like it was trying to speak. He leaned closer, tracing the lines with his finger, as if touching the pattern would make it reveal its meaning. He typed rapidly, running decoding algorithms that normally took hours. Nothing worked. Every method he tried seemed to fail, as if the signal knew what he was doing. Then a series of shapes appeared on the screen. Not numbers, not letters, but geometric symbols that twisted and moved in impossible ways. Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. He called out to his colleague, a young analyst named Rena. She was tall and thin, with hair always pulled into a tight bun, her expression sharp and focused. She came over quickly, eyes scanning the screen. "Do you see this?" Elias asked. Rena nodded, a little pale. "It doesn't match anything we've seen before. It's not random, though. Someone or something made this." Elias swallowed hard.
"It's trying to communicate."
"But I can't make sense of it. Not yet." Meanwhile, far above Earth, on a platform orbiting a remote planet, Mara Kade was staring at her own set of screens. She worked for the United Nations, though her assignment was unusual. Her role was not to fight or explore, but to watch, to understand, to represent Earth in ways few others could. She was alone in the control room, though security drones hovered silently outside. A transmission blinked on her console, flagged as unauthorized. Mara frowned and activated it. A strange voice, not quite human, filled the room. It spoke in tones that seemed to vibrate in her chest, yet she understood the meaning perfectly. "To the people of Earth, we see you. You are part of the universe now. Prepare." The message ended abruptly, leaving her staring at the empty screen. She could feel her pulse in her throat. She had been trained to handle alien communication, but this was different. This was not a first contact attempt in the usual sense. This was a message meant for everyone, and it carried a weight she could not describe. She activated a secure line to the United Nations, but before anyone could respond, the transmission repeated itself. This time, it included a countdown, numbers appearing in rapid succession. 72, 71, 70. Back on Earth, Elias had run every simulation he could think of. The symbols on the screen began to shift again, forming shapes that resembled familiar objects, yet they were still alien. It was as if the signal was learning, adapting to his methods. Rena watched him, worried. "Elias, you're pushing yourself too hard. Maybe we should call the authorities." He shook his head, eyes never leaving the screen. "If we don't understand this, no one else will. Something is coming, and we have to be ready."
Hours passed.
The sun disappeared entirely behind the mountains, leaving the array bathed in cool darkness. The lights of the control room reflected off the metallic surfaces, casting long shadows. Elias and Rena worked without pause, tracing the signal's movements, recording every change. The symbols began to form a pattern that resembled a map. Not a map of Earth, not a map of known stars, but something else. Somewhere in the depths of space, there was a point, a location, that the signal seemed to be pointing to. Elias felt a mix of fear and excitement. He could not explain why, but he knew that if this was an invitation, they had no choice but to accept. Mara watched her own countdown reach 50. Her fingers hovered over the controls. She knew that if she did nothing, whatever was coming would not wait for humanity to catch up. She had to respond, but she had no way of knowing what the right response was. He took a deep breath and sent a simple acknowledgement back into space, a pulse of energy carrying the message, "We see you. We are here." The signal shifted immediately. The shapes became clearer, forming letters, a language that was neither written nor spoken. Mara felt as if the symbols were pressing into her mind, filling her thoughts with images of distant stars, collapsing worlds, and civilizations that had vanished without a trace. She shivered, knowing that whatever was observing her was powerful beyond imagination. Elias watched the map solidify. It showed a route, a path, through dangerous regions of space where no human had ever traveled. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This was not a warning. It was a test. The universe had singled out humanity, and now someone or something was waiting to see how they would respond. Reyna glanced at him, concern etched on her face.
Elias, we don't even know what we're facing. This could be a trap. He looked at her and smiled faintly, the tension easing just slightly.
Reyna, that's what makes it human. We take the risk anyway. Meanwhile, Mara activated a secure data link to Earth, sending every piece of information she had collected. The images, the symbols, the patterns, all of it would be analyzed by the brightest minds on the planet. She did not know if it would be enough, but she could not do nothing. As the countdown reached its final hours, the signal pulsed again, brighter, stronger, and more insistent. Elias and Mara, separated by millions of miles, felt the same strange resonance in their minds. It was as if the universe itself had reached out and touched them. They were no longer just observers. They were participants. Then, as the clock hit the final minute, the signal expanded, filling the skies, the monitors, the space around them. Elias felt a wave of energy that made his knees weak. Mara felt her heart race, not from fear, but from the overwhelming sense of possibility. The message was no longer just a warning or a test. It was an invitation to join something far greater than themselves, something that could not be ignored, and in that instant, both of them knew that humanity had been noticed. Not for its power, not for its technology, not for its conquest, but for something deeper, its ability to hope, to adapt, to reach for the unknown. The universe was watching, and for the first time humanity had a place among the stars. Elias whispered to himself as if speaking to the empty room, "This is just the beginning." Mara, on her station high above the planet, pressed her hand against the glass, staring into the infinite darkness of space. "Yes," she said quietly. "We are ready." The sky answered, and the universe waited. Elias and Mara had been chosen for reasons they did not yet understand. The signal from the universe had reached out to them personally, weaving itself into their minds in a way that no one else could feel. Earth's government scrambled to react, but their confusion and fear only slowed them. Meanwhile, Elias and Mara prepared not with weapons, but with thought and courage, as they sensed that something much larger than themselves was unfolding. In a secret facility far from the world's prying eyes, scientists and diplomats gathered. Most had never met Elias or Mara before, but all knew the importance of their roles. Machines hummed in the background, transmitting data collected from space, while analysts tried to decipher the impossible symbols that had emerged in the signal. It was a puzzle unlike any other, and time was slipping away. Mara, seated at a communication console, watched the latest images arrive from deep space. Stars glimmered in ways that seemed unnatural, forming lines and clusters that could not be explained by physics alone. The transmission seemed to anticipate their questions, revealing just enough to guide them, but never fully explaining itself. She felt a strange sense of responsibility. She was not only watching but representing all of humanity in this silent conversation with the universe. Elias paced the room, eyes fixed on a screen that displayed a constantly shifting map. The map traced a path through regions of space where human ships had never traveled. Nebula swirled with colors he had never seen, and black holes marked areas of danger beyond imagination. He realized that the universe was testing them, not their courage or their strength, but their ability to understand and act with wisdom. Rena, standing beside him, glanced at his face. "Do you think we are ready for this?" she asked quietly. Elias shook his head. "Ready? No. But maybe that is the point. The universe wants to see what we do when we are unprepared. That is the measure of humanity." Far above Earth, Mara received a message that carried a new urgency. The countdown from the first signal had ended, but now a second set of numbers appeared, slower, deliberate. It was an invitation to make the first move, and she knew it would not be easy. She took a deep breath and began transmitting a reply, a carefully measured pulse of energy that represented human intent. It was not just a message. It was a declaration that humanity would not hide. The universe responded immediately. The symbols morphed into shapes that suggested intelligence and curiosity. Elias watched, fascinated, as the map now displayed more than just a route. It highlighted points of interest, locations where civilizations had flourished and disappeared. The implication was clear. Humanity's future depended not only on survival, but on understanding and learning from what had come before. Mara's console beeped urgently. A nearby analyst looked over her shoulder, eyes wide. "These are star systems that no human ship has ever entered. Many are unstable, dangerous, uncharted. You cannot go there." Mara shook her head. "We are not being asked to survive easily. We are being asked to make choices, to act, to represent all of us." In the days that followed, Elias and Mara worked tirelessly. They coordinated with scientists across the globe, pooling every piece of knowledge humanity had acquired. They studied the histories of vanished civilizations, attempting to understand why they had failed. They simulated decisions, moral choices, and the consequences of both action and inaction. Each trial brought new insight, but also new challenges. The universe was pushing them harder than they had ever been pushed. Then came the first true test. A strange energy pulse struck a distant probe, scattering its systems and rendering it useless. It was not an accident. It was a warning. Elias and Mara realized that some unknown force was observing their efforts, judging not just the speed or intelligence of their responses, but the spirit behind them. Humanity would be measured not by what it could build or destroy, but by what it chose to protect and nurture. Mara's thoughts often drifted to her family back on Earth. She imagined their lives, the quiet evenings, the laughter of children, the simple joy she had almost forgotten. She understood that these small, fragile moments were what made humanity unique. It was not just science or exploration that mattered. It was the ability to care, to create, to hope. She shared these reflections with Elias in long data streams, and he listened, sometimes responding with a few simple words, but always feeling the weight of shared understanding. One night, as the orbiting platform passed into the shadow of a nearby planet, Mara experienced something she could not explain. The symbols from the signal appeared before her eyes, not on the screens but in her mind, vivid and three-dimensional. They seemed to speak directly to her, asking questions, presenting dilemmas, testing her judgment. She felt fear and exhilaration in equal measure. She realized that the universe was not just observing, it was interacting, shaping them into participants in a grand experiment. Meanwhile, Elias found himself in a similar situation. Alone in the quiet of the array, he felt the signal wrap around his thoughts, probing and responding. He tried to act logically, to maintain control, but he discovered that intuition mattered just as much as reason. Sometimes the right answer was not the fastest, not the most efficient, but the one that reflected humanity's essence: empathy, cooperation, and courage. As the tests continued, new observers appeared. Strange vessels, shapes that seemed impossible, drifted at the edges of the known systems. They watched silently, never attacking, never communicating directly, yet their presence was undeniable. Elias and Mara understood that these were the witnesses, recording humanity's every decision, every reaction. Failure was an option, but the consequences could extend beyond Earth, beyond their own lifetimes. Despite the immense pressure, they learned to work together. Elias's analytical mind complemented Mara's intuition. Rena provided insights that neither of them could have seen alone. And the human team around them, though separated by distance and discipline, became a network of thought and action, united in purpose. They were not just individuals. They were a collective representing all of humanity, a single voice reaching into the cosmos. Then came a turning point. The signal presented a scenario unlike anything they had prepared for. A planet on the brink of destruction, home to a civilization far older than humanity, facing a choice between self-preservation and helping others. Mara and Elias studied the data, realizing that this was no longer a simulation. The universe wanted to see what they would do when the stakes were real, when consequences were immediate and irreversible. Mara felt her chest tighten. If we act, we risk everything. If we do nothing, we fail the test. What do we choose? Elias responded slowly, thoughtfully. We act, not because we are guaranteed success, but because it is the right thing to do. That is what makes us human. Together they devised a plan to intervene, using every resource at their disposal. The solution was not perfect. It carried risks and uncertainties, but it reflected humanity's willingness to confront the unknown, to help others even when the outcome was uncertain. They launched the operation, their actions observed by the silent, inscrutable eyes of the universe. As the events unfolded, the alien observers remained distant, watching how humans balanced logic, morality, and courage. Each decision Elias and Mara made, every risk they took, was recorded and analyzed. It became clear that the universe did not expect perfection. It expected humanity to show its character, to demonstrate the unique traits that set them apart from every other species that had come and gone. When the operation concluded, the threatened civilization survived, though not without cost. Mara and Elias felt relief, but they knew the test was far from over. The universe was patient. It would continue to observe, to challenge, to shape humanity's path. But for the first time, they felt a spark of pride. They had shown that humanity could act with courage and wisdom, even in the face of incomprehensible forces. Messages from Earth poured in, congratulating them, though most people did not understand the true significance of what had happened. Elias and Mara communicated quietly, aware that the universe was still listening. They had passed an important threshold, but the journey had only begun. The map of the stars still held countless mysteries, and the observers remained silent and watchful, waiting to see what humanity would do next. In the quiet moments, Mara and Elias shared thoughts across the vast distances that separated them. They spoke of hope, of fear, of what it meant to carry the responsibility of representing all of humanity. They realized that the universe had chosen them not for their skills alone, but because they could think, feel, and act in ways that reflected the best of what humans could be. The signal had found humanity in its essence, and it had reached out to those who could respond in kind. As the days passed, they prepared for whatever challenge would come next. The signal continued to pulse, evolving, teaching, testing. And though the path ahead was uncertain, Elias and Mara understood that they were no longer alone. Humanity had been noticed, and the universe was ready to engage with them on a level that no one had ever experienced before. For the first time, they realized the truth. This was not just a test, it was an opportunity. An opportunity to prove that even a small species, fragile and inexperienced, could make a mark on the cosmos. And in that realization, they found the courage to continue, together as representatives of all humanity, facing a universe that had finally begun to notice them. The change came without warning. One moment, Elias was standing in the control room, surrounded by familiar screens and quiet human voices. The next moment, the room vanished. The floor beneath his feet dissolved into light, and the air felt heavier, thicker, as if reality itself had shifted. He tried to reach out, but his hands passed through glowing shapes that felt both solid and unreal. Mara experienced the same moment, though she was light years away. The orbiting platform faded from view, replaced by a vast open space filled with soft white light. There were no walls, no stars, no sense of direction. She felt neither cold nor warmth, only awareness. She knew instantly that this was not a dream. A presence filled the space around them. It did not have a body, a face, or a voice in the human sense. Yet when it spoke, The meaning arrived, fully formed in their minds. You are now within the trial. Elias felt his heart race. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. The presence continued, calm and neutral. Your species has been observed. You have shown curiosity and cooperation. Now your values will be measured. The light around Elias shifted. Images formed, sharp and clear. He found himself standing on a broken world. The sky was dark, cracked by red lightning. Ruined cities stretched to the horizon. In front of him stood a small group of survivors, thin and exhausted, their eyes filled with fear. A device lay at his feet, glowing faintly. Knowledge Preservation Unit, the presence explained. This device contains the full record of this civilization. Activating it will transmit the data beyond this system, but doing so will draw hostile forces to this location. You will not survive. Elias swallowed. He understood instantly. If he activated the device, the knowledge would live on, but he would die. If he walked away, he would live, but everything these people had ever been would be lost forever. The survivors looked at him, not speaking, but waiting. At the same time, Mara's trial took a different form. She stood above a living world, green and blue, beautiful and full of life. Two paths stretched before her, glowing softly. One path led to a nearby system where billions lived in peace. The other led to a single planet facing destruction from an approaching cosmic storm. Intervention is limited, the presence told her. You may divert the storm toward the inhabited system, saving the dying planet. Or you may protect the populated system and allow the single world to be destroyed. Mara felt her breath catch. There was no trick, no hidden solution. Either choice meant loss. She thought of Earth. She thought of history. She thought of how often humanity had faced similar choices, forced to decide who would be saved and who would be sacrificed. Back in his trial, Elias knelt beside the device. Thak. His mind raced. Logic told him survival mattered. Humanity needed witnesses, thinkers, people who could carry knowledge forward. But another part of him, quieter but stronger, whispered that some things were worth more than life. He activated the device. Light exploded outward. Elias felt pain for the first time since entering the trial, sharp and overwhelming. As the transmission began, he felt the present shift. Outcome recorded, it said. Then the world dissolved. Mara stood frozen between the two paths. Tears formed in her eyes, though she did not remember starting to cry. She knew whatever she chose would stay with her forever. She remembered the countless human stories of loss and impossible decisions. She remembered that leadership was not about avoiding pain, but accepting it. She chose the populated system. The storm changed course. The single planet vanished beneath waves of energy. Mara felt a deep ache settle into her chest. Outcome recorded, the presence said. The light faded. Elias and Mara found themselves once again in the white space, now facing each other, across a short distance. They could see one another clearly. Their expressions said everything. They had both made choices that hurt. You have failed, the presence said calmly. Mara felt the words like a blow. Failed. The finality of it echoed inside her. Your decisions prioritized emotional values over optimal outcomes. This is inefficient. He wanted to argue, to explain that life was more than numbers and outcomes. But before he could respond, the presence continued. And yet your failures differ from those previously observed. The space around them shifted again. Images appeared, showing countless other species facing similar trials. Again and again the pattern was the same. They chose themselves. They chose certainty. They chose survival at any cost. None chose loss willingly, the presence said. None accepted suffering as part of value. Mara looked at Elias. For the first time she understood the full weight of what they had done. They had failed the test. But they had revealed something else. You value meaning over continuation, the presence said. This trait is statistically rare. The presence paused. Elias sensed something like hesitation. Additional evaluation required. The white space faded. Elias felt himself falling, not through space, but through layers of thought and memory. He relived moments from human history, not as an observer, but as a participant. Wars, sacrifices, acts of kindness in times of despair. The simple choice to help when help was not required. Mara experienced the same flood of memories. She felt the pain of loss and the warmth of compassion, the human tendency to build again after destruction. She understood that the trial was no longer just about decisions. It was about identity. When the sensations ended, Elias and Mara stood once more in familiar surroundings. Elias was back in the control room. Mara stood on her orbiting platform. Time had passed, but not as much as they expected. Rena rushed toward Elias, eyes wide. She grabbed his arm.
You disappeared,
She said.
just for a moment.
Then the systems went wild. What happened? Elias struggled to find words. We were tested, he said finally, and we failed. High above, Mara sat down heavily, hands shaking. She sent a brief message to Earth, encoded and secure. We were tested, we did not pass. But something has changed. Almost immediately, new data streams appeared across human networks. The signal had altered its behavior. It was no longer instructing or guiding. It was watching more closely than ever before. Somewhere beyond human understanding, the presence recorded a new classification. Species designation updated. Not approved, not rejected. Observed with interest. Elias stared at the stars outside the array. He felt fear, doubt, and a strange sense of pride all at once. Humanity had not been perfect. Humanity had not been efficient. But humanity had been human. Mara looked out into space from her station, the darkness no longer feeling empty. Whatever was out there now understood something important. The universe had seen humanity fail, and for the first time it had paused instead of turning away. Earth was on edge. Reports of strange energy pulses, unexplainable phenomena, and temporary communication blackouts created panic among governments. Most of the public noticed nothing, seeing only news of minor power surges and satellite glitches. Behind the scenes, Elias and Mara worked non-stop, coordinating efforts that extended far beyond human comprehension. They understood the situation had escalated. The observers were now testing humanity in ways more direct, more dangerous than before. Elias reviewed incoming data from the deepest arrays. The readings were confusing, even frightening. Some regions of space near Earth were suddenly active with signals and movement that did not correspond to any known spacecraft or natural events. They moved with purpose, calculating positions, adjusting in response to human activity. For the first time, Elias recognized them not as natural phenomena, but as deliberate interference. Rena looked over his shoulder. "What are they doing?" she asked, voice low. "Are they attacking?" Elias shook his head slowly. "I don't think so. Not yet." They're observing, testing, forcing reactions, and humans are giving them exactly what they want to see. High above, Mara studied a similar set of data from her orbital station. A new fleet, invisible to Earth's instruments until now, appeared at the edge of the solar system. These were not friendly visitors. Their movements were precise, calculated, efficient. Mara's instincts told her they would strike if humanity hesitated. She sent an immediate alert to Earth's security councils, but she knew conventional defenses were useless. Humanity had no chance against this unknown force in raw combat. The observers, whatever they were, had created the perfect dilemma. They forced humanity into improvisation, into decisions that exposed both their weaknesses and their strengths. People responded not with panic, but with ingenuity. Civilian engineers began redirecting satellites and energy flows to prevent grid failures. Scientists used old research to devise new communication methods. Citizens volunteered to stabilize systems manually, even at great personal risk. Elias watched with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Humanity was showing its best traits, but the cost was growing. One night, as the activity increased near Earth, Mara was forced to act. She directed a small team of unmanned drones to intercept energy surges approaching populated regions. The drones were fragile, outdated, and likely to fail, but they represented humanity's first real defense. As the surges neared, Mara calculated trajectories with razor precision, sacrificing some drones to divert energy away from major cities. Each sacrifice weighed on her conscience, but she understood that risk and loss were now part of the test. Elias coordinated ground teams to reinforce communications. Systems that had never been meant for rapid adaptation were now stretched to their limits. Engineers improvised routing methods, hacked together new software, and even repurposed old satellites to relay messages. Throughout the night, humans worked tirelessly, moving beyond fear and doubt. They were not perfect, but they were determined. Elias felt the observer's influence, a silent presence pushing them further than anyone could endure alone. Mara received another direct message from the observers, encoded in ways humans had only recently begun to decipher. They did not speak in words, but the meaning was clear. They wanted to see if humanity could respond with wisdom when confronted with impossible choices. Each decision was observed, recorded, and weighed against standards beyond human comprehension. At the same time, Elias faced a moral dilemma. A secondary energy surge was headed for a remote colony, one that housed a valuable scientific archive. Redirecting the energy would save the archive but leave a smaller nearby town exposed. He calculated probabilities, odds of survival, and chances of success. Then he realized something crucial. The observers were not interested in the numbers. They were interested in what humans would value more: knowledge or life. He made his decision, diverting the energy to protect people rather than machines. The archive was lost, but human life was preserved. Mara, observing the same principle elsewhere, decided to act with empathy rather than pure logic. She redirected protective energy shields over a planet facing an asteroid storm, knowing it might leave a mining station vulnerable. The station was destroyed, but thousands of lives were saved. Each choice brought consequences. Each choice reflected humanity's capacity for selflessness and courage. Days passed, and the pressure mounted. Elias, Mara, and their teams worked without pause. They slept only in brief intervals, ate little, but continued their efforts. The observers seemed to escalate challenges every hour. Small fleets appeared and disappeared. Energy bursts struck systems at random, and entire communication networks threatened to collapse. Yet humanity adapted. They built alliances where none existed, sharing resources and information at unprecedented rates. Humans were improvising, cooperating, and sacrificing. It was a performance that no other species had ever managed. One evening, Elias sat back, exhausted. Rena noticed him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do you think it's enough?" she asked. He shook his head, feeling the weight of responsibility. "I don't know. But humans are trying, and that counts for something. Every life saved, every decision made with care, it all counts." Mara, meanwhile, watched her fleet of drones intervene in yet another crisis. She noticed patterns emerging in the observers' behavior. They were not just testing survival skills. They were measuring creativity, sacrifice, and moral choice. Humans were learning to act not for themselves, but for others, even under immense pressure. A new signal arrived, one that neither Elias nor Mara had anticipated. It was not a command or a warning, but a message of possibility. It hinted at methods of manipulating energy in ways humans had never considered. Elias and Mara shared the data across secure channels. Teams on Earth experimented, discovering that with careful coordination, energy surges could be redirected more efficiently, minimizing harm. Each breakthrough gave hope and strengthened confidence. Yet every success came with cost. Civilian teams exposed themselves to danger, some losing their lives. Satellites and research stations were destroyed. Machines were lost. Resources depleted. Every choice highlighted the fragility of humanity, yet also its resilience. Elias and Mara realized that survival was no longer the point. The observers were measuring the human spirit itself. One night, as a massive energy wave approached Earth, Elias made a decision that would risk his life. He manually rerouted a power flow, knowing that the overload could fry the array and electrocuting him in the process. Rena shouted, but Elias was determined. He completed the rerouting just as the wave hit. The energy dissipated harmlessly into space. Elias survived, but only just. He realized that the test was as much about personal courage as collective action. Mara experienced a similar moment. An asteroid cluster threatened a small colony orbiting a gas giant. Conventional defenses failed. She personally guided a single drone through a narrow corridor of space, using real-time calculations to intercept the asteroids. Every second mattered. She succeeded, but the strain left her trembling. She knew that every human life she saved represented a choice, and the observers were counting. As the challenges continued, the teams grew stronger. They learned to anticipate the patterns of the observers, improvising faster and more efficiently. Human creativity blossomed under pressure. Small acts of kindness, clever solutions, and sacrifices multiplied across the globe. The observers remained silent, recording, waiting. Elias and Mara began to understand that this was the true trial. Not destruction, not battle, but the capacity to act morally and wisely in the face of overwhelming odds. Finally, after what felt like weeks, the pressure eased. The fleets disappeared, the energy surges ceased, and communication channels returned to normal. Earth was safe, though battered. Humanity had survived not through superior technology or strength, but through unity, courage, and moral decision-making. Elias and Mara looked at one another, exhausted, yet proud. A new signal appeared, gentle, almost human in tone. The observers had not declared victory or failure. Instead, they had simply observed, silently acknowledging the humanity they had witnessed. Elias felt relief, but he also understood the quiet warning. The trial was far from over. The universe was patient, and it would continue to watch. Mara returned to her station, gazing at Earth. The world seemed small and fragile, yet infinitely precious. Every life saved, every act of courage, every sacrifice mattered. Humanity had responded not perfectly, but with heart, and for the first time she felt that the universe might recognize that quality, even if the observers would not speak directly. Elias, back at the array, looked up at the stars. The skies were calm again, but he sensed that the trials were only a part of something greater. Humanity had shown resilience, creativity, and compassion, and even in failure, they had revealed the core of what it meant to be human. Somewhere in the vastness of space, the silent watchers recorded every choice, every act, and every sacrifice. The observers did not speak, did not judge in ways humans could understand. They only recorded, and in the recording, humanity's story began to shine. It was messy, imperfect, and dangerous, yet it was beautiful in its courage and perseverance. And for the first time, both Elias and Mara knew the truth. Survival alone was not the test. It was the actions taken in the face of fear, the willingness to sacrifice, and the capacity to care that mattered most. Humanity had given the universe a glimpse of something rare, and somewhere beyond the stars a silent acknowledgement waited, unspoken but deeply understood. Elias and Mara knew that what came next would be the ultimate choice. The observers had not judged them as failures or successes. Instead, they had offered a single opportunity, one that no human could ignore. The signal pulsed across space and minds alike, connecting them again in a way that bypassed language, screens, and even thought itself. It was as if the universe was speaking directly to their souls. The offer was simple and terrifying. Humanity could be saved, elevated beyond any known limits, but at an unimaginable personal cost. Elias and Mara would not survive in any form remembered by history or memory. Their lives, their actions, even their names, would be erased from Earth. No records, no monuments, no recognition. The universe would protect humanity, but the cost fell entirely on them. Elias felt his chest tighten. He thought of Rena, of his family, of the countless lives he had touched in his career. To vanish from history was an almost unbearable thought. But when he glanced at Mara, he saw the same resolve mirrored in her eyes. They had come this far, had endured trials, sacrifices, and unimaginable choices. Now it was their turn to act. Mara felt her mind race, thinking of Earth. She imagined the cities, the oceans, the forests. She imagined children sleeping peacefully, people building, creating, living. The cost was terrifying, yet she knew that the value of humanity's survival outweighed her own existence. She nodded to Elias. They both understood without words. This was the final trial. They prepared in silence, their actions precise and deliberate. Elias initiated the process, connecting humanity's data, cultural records, and scientific knowledge to the pulse of the universe. He ensured every detail was captured, every human achievement transmitted to the cosmic archive. Mara coordinated the global network, sending messages across the planet in real time, guiding human thought and energy to align with the final transmission. The universe responded. Light and energy surrounded them, sensations beyond description. Elias felt his body dissolve, consciousness merging with a vast awareness. Mara experienced the same, her identity stretching and fading, becoming part of something larger than any human could comprehend. The act was not painful, but it was absolute. Every memory of them on Earth was wiped, every trace of their existence erased from history. Yet even as they vanished, the effects of their actions rippled outward. Humanity's survival became assured in ways subtle and profound. Energy systems stabilized globally, threats from the alien observers ceased, and unseen protection spread across Earth. The knowledge Elias and Mara had transmitted formed a foundation that would guide humanity for generations, though no one would know who had built it. They had given everything and received nothing in return. In the moments after their departure, Earth seemed normal. The sun rose. People went about their lives, unaware of the near catastrophe that had been averted. Scientists and engineers continued their work, finding new ways to improve life and expand knowledge, guided by insights that seemed to arrive from nowhere. The pulse of the universe remained, a quiet force that protected and guided humanity, its origins unknown. Somewhere beyond time, the observers recorded the final act. It was unprecedented. No species had ever offered itself completely for the sake of others. They had measured courage, wisdom, and morality, but Elias and Mara had transcended all expectations. Humanity had not only survived, it had been elevated. Though erased from history, Elias and Mara continued to exist in a state beyond human comprehension, watching Earth and its people. They could see, in ways invisible to humans, how small acts of kindness, curiosity, and courage spread through generations. They witnessed the growth of civilizations, the triumphs and failures of humans, and the quiet beauty of everyday life. Though they were unseen and unknown, they were always present, guardians in a form the universe allowed them to inhabit. The universe itself seemed to smile, a subtle shift in the fabric of existence, an acknowledgement of humanity's unique nature. It had tested, challenged, and observed, and in the end it had accepted humanity not because of strength or perfection, but because of resilience, morality, and the willingness to act beyond self-interest. Back on Earth, humans continued unaware of the sacrifice, yet subtle changes were evident. Decisions came easier in times of crisis. Alliances formed more naturally, and people acted with a sense of purpose that seemed instinctive. Humanity had been marked not by memory, but by influence. The world continued, brighter and more harmonious, because two people had made a choice that no one could remember. The observers, silent and patient, recorded the final entry in their logs. Two individuals had transcended mortality, offering everything for the sake of a species. Humanity's story had taken a new path, one that would ripple through time. It was imperfect, fragile, and dangerous, yet beautiful beyond calculation. In the quiet of their new existence, Elias and Mara could watch, understand, and occasionally guide without revealing themselves. They were no longer bound by human limitations. They could see humanity's potential and encourage it subtly, ensuring that the lessons of sacrifice, cooperation, and courage endured. Though forgotten, they had become integral to humanity's continued growth. And somewhere across the universe, the silent acknowledgement remained. Humanity had been tested, and while individuals failed in small ways, collectively they had achieved something extraordinary. The final lesson was clear. Greatness was not measured by memory or fame, but by the courage to act when it mattered most, even when no one would remember. Elias and Mara had given humanity that chance, and in doing so had ensured that the species would continue, grow, and ultimately smile. Years passed on Earth, though time had little meaning for Elias and Mara. Humanity thrived, unknowing of the sacrifice that had ensured its survival. Cities expanded, technology advanced, and people explored space more boldly than ever before. Yet underlying the progress was a quiet influence, subtle guidance that humans never noticed, shaping choices, cooperation, and curiosity. It was as if humanity had an unseen hand helping them navigate the complexities of the universe. Elias observed from beyond perception, understanding human behavior more deeply than ever. He watched civilizations rise and fall, nations work together and clash, yet always recover. He saw humans invent, create, and dream with resilience that astonished even him. Mara experienced the same, marveling at the small, everyday acts that built hope, the kindness that spread quietly among communities, and the moments of courage that no one ever recorded. The observers had given humanity the chance, and humanity was taking it in ways neither Elias nor Mara could have fully imagined. Despite their absence in the physical world, both felt connected to humanity. They could sense fear, joy, curiosity, and compassion. Every new discovery, every bold leap into the unknown sent ripples through their awareness. They realized that humans had inherited not only the knowledge they had transmitted, but the values that had guided their choices: courage, empathy, and selflessness. These traits became intrinsic, a subtle thread woven into the species' behavior across the globe. On a distant planet, scientists studying cosmic phenomena noticed anomalies that defied explanation. Patterns in stellar movements, slight distortions in gravitational fields, and unexplained bursts of energy seemed to protect inhabited worlds. They could not understand it, and yet it felt consistent, like a hidden order working quietly. Elias and Mara, in their ethereal existence, guided these discoveries without revealing themselves. They nudged humanity subtly, ensuring that knowledge would grow and decisions would reflect the lessons learned from past trials. Over time, humans began to act in ways that surprised even themselves. Rival nations collaborated, exploring joint projects across space. Communities protected the environment with more care, not fully understanding why. Children growing up were encouraged to explore, question, and create, absorbing values that seemed natural, though no one could explain their origin. Elias and Mara understood that these outcomes were the real victory. Humanity was changing not because it had been forced to, but because it was capable of choosing the right path when guided subtly. The observers continued to watch, recording every moment, yet they no longer intervened directly. They had seen what humanity could become, and it was beyond the expectations they had calculated. Elias and Mara sensed satisfaction in their silent acknowledgement. Humanity had not only survived, it had grown, matured, and embraced the principles that mattered most in the grand scope of the universe. The species' resilience, morality, and ingenuity were now unmistakable. In rare moments of reflection, Elias and Mara glimpsed fragments of human life that carried echoes of their influence. A city where citizens built community gardens in formerly abandoned areas, a team of explorers who avoided conflict to share discoveries with neighboring civilizations, a scientist who dedicated years to preserving endangered species. All showed the quiet, persistent impact of choices guided by courage and empathy. These moments, small but profound, reassured Elias and Mara that their sacrifice had not been in vain. Mara watched a young girl point to the night sky, dreaming aloud about traveling to distant stars. She smiled, feeling the subtle joy of knowing that humanity's curiosity would continue, unbound and inspired. Elias observed a man offering his seat to an elderly stranger in a crowded transport hub, a simple act of kindness that reflected the principles they had hoped to instill. These small victories, unseen by the world, were monumental in their significance. Though removed from Earth, Elias and Mara sometimes sensed the collective pulse of humanity, a rhythm of life, thought, and emotion. They felt hope, fear, love, and courage all at once. It was a presence larger than any single individual, a force that represented the essence of humanity. They understood that their mission had been more than survival. It had been to ignite the potential for humans to act beyond themselves, to inspire courage, wisdom, and empathy even without reward or recognition. Occasionally, Elias thought about what it would have been like to live, to witness firsthand the advancements of humanity. He felt a quiet longing but no regret. Mara shared the feeling, a wistful awareness of the life they had given up, yet a profound satisfaction in the impact they had created. They had become guardians in a new form, eternal observers with the ability to shape humanity in subtle, enduring ways. In the fabric of the universe, the observers recorded their final entry regarding Earth and its species. Humanity had been tested, challenged, and observed through unimaginable trials. The record concluded not with judgment, but with acknowledgement. Elias and Mara had offered themselves completely, and in doing so, humanity had achieved a state of resilience, creativity, and moral awareness that was rare and valuable. The observers, silent and impartial, noted that humanity now possessed qualities worthy of attention and protection. Though Elias and Mara no longer existed in the memories of humans, the imprint of their actions was everywhere. Every decision, every act of courage, every small choice that upheld kindness and wisdom carried a trace of their influence. They had become part of humanity's essence, woven into the species in ways that no one could erase or fully understand. The universe, vast and ancient, seemed to settle into a quiet acknowledgement. There was no fanfare, no applause, no grand announcement. Just a subtle shift in the energy of existence, a gentle alignment that reflected satisfaction and hope. Humanity had been tested, and the species had responded in a way that transcended ordinary survival. It was now part of a larger cosmic order, marked not by conquest or technology, but by the courage to act rightly even when no one would remember. Elias and Mara, in their timeless unseen state, watched with quiet pride. Humanity's journey would continue, full of challenges, discoveries, failures, and triumphs. Every new generation would carry forward lessons of courage, empathy, and creativity. The species would grow, adapt, and reach for the stars, guided subtly by the principles instilled during the trials and the final sacrifice. And somewhere across the vastness of the universe, the silent acknowledgement persisted. Humanity had been tested. It had faced challenges beyond comprehension, and though individuals had faltered, collectively the species had shown resilience, wisdom, and moral courage. Elias and Mara had given everything, and in return, humanity was given the chance to flourish. The universe did not need words or symbols to recognize this truth. Elias and Mara could feel the pulse of life on Earth, the heartbeat of humanity spreading outward. It was strong, vibrant, and unbroken. For the first time, they allowed themselves a quiet, invisible smile. Humanity was safe, capable, and full of potential. And though the world would never know their names, their presence remained forever, woven into the endless story of humankind.